Welcome everyone to TAM Lab number 44. Today we're excited to have Sonny Nguyen joining us. He's going to be going through a deep dive of vRealize Orchestrator, or VRO. So I will stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to Sonny and you can take it away.
Sure. Let me share my screen. I hope everyone can see this.
Yeah,
Okay.
It looks good.
All right. So here's my agenda and here's my thought. I'm not going to go too deep into VRO itself because the thought is that, there's still a decent amount of documentation out there that'll explain that to you. What I've come to realize after using it for a few years is people, every time they hear or see Orchestrator, they think it's coding. They think it's Java, and they get overwhelmed. So what I'm hoping to talk to you guys today is to try to simplify certain pieces so that way not only can you be comfortable going in and just peeking around, but it will allow you to grow as well. All right. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. And don't hesitate to speak up because I'd love it to be more interactive if possible. Questions here is could I have a raise of hands of who's actually gotten into VRO or VMware Orchestrator? So I see Chris. I see Mike. Yep. So it seems like a few of you guys have. Here's the question for you guys. Are you guys comfortable with the Java version or you guys like the HTML5 version? So let's see. The HTML5 version has just been recently made available, and I have to say, it is pretty beautiful. I mean, it's a catalog-like environment, very similar to what you see with, VRA and all of the other web-based service offering. Okay, so it's great. However, it's not consistent. I've got problems where the old Java version is more valuable to me than say the HTML5. Okay, the HTML5 is tag based, so you can tag a bunch of stuff together. Unfortunately, you can't see folders this way. Okay, I've noticed a decent amount of folks here have not seen VRO. Let me just give you a brief intro to what VRO is. Right, after you open up the client, what you're going to see is just two things. One part is the library, which has everything, all the generic coding for stuff like REST API, for Active Directories, for PowerShell, SSH, vCenter. A lot of our VMware Suite stuff is built into here. The more complex stuff has their own repository. For example, if I were to show you from a GUI perspective, all right, bear with me for 1 second. Oh, actually, no, never mind. That's another topic that
I don't see NSX in this list.
You're absolutely right, because what happens is for the complex or bigger suite of stuff, you'd have to import additional plugins, and then NSX will start showing up. Very similarly, VR operations, I plug that in to make this available. Does that make sense? There's a lot more to this, obviously, because there are some key pieces, but not everything. So you keep having to add more plugins to get more resources.
If you add a plugin, how is that plugin upgraded?
Good question. So as part of the GUI for installing the plugin, there's also updating the plugin as well. So it checks to see what you have already and then what it applies to. You brought up a good point. With the updates, you have to keep in mind that they may overwrite the original workflows.
Which is always a problem.
Which is always a problem. So one of the key things that I always recommend people do is to create a whole new folder. Okay, and it could be anything. But what you do is, for example, I've made this presentation in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and during one of the roundtables. And I reached out to Steve saying, hey, I think the rest of the TAM community may get value out of this as well. But what I was getting at was I took some of the generic ones that are from the library and I made it my own. What that does is it separates it from the original. So if we were to ever update the original, it never breaks the ones that you're working on. One of those kind of, good practices of working with Orchestrator, okay? So I just want to show you one more thing in here, just to simplify everything, right? So this is one of the workflows that are fairly common, right? If you take a look, there are key pieces that is of value. One of them is variables going in, and then the second piece is the schema, all right? Which is how the whole entire workflow works. So what you'll see here is there's a bunch of variations where it can lead, but the bulk of the data is actually here. So this is where people get a little bit nervous. As you can see, it's all JavaScript, all right? And when every time someone sees that, or I work with someone who looks at this for the first time, it looks very daunting. The answer is it is a little bit daunting, but here's the thing. What I'm going to talk to you guys through is if you were to just leverage it the way it is, you could actually have a functional experience, a working experience, and then grow from there, okay? So for example, the way it is, so here's one example. This is a shell script, right? A shell command. I actually took this from over here, which is run a shell command. I just made a copy of it. And this one is actually the same exact one. It's just a duplicate. So if you were to ever want to run this workflow, it's going to ask you for a host name, right? And for me, I actually stood up a box to do this. It's going to ask what command you want to do. Let's do, last time I think I did Docker. I can always do, well, you know what? Uptime is fine. Uptime is fine. Then it's going to ask you for the username. And what you're going to see is it starts going through, okay? And then when it lands here, it's either red or green. Down here, you'll see what happens, which is it connects in using a password, it ran the uptime, and then it gives you the output. So for running Orchestrator, you could actually use a lot of these built-in workflows just right off the bat.
Hey, Sonny, quick question. So I recall from a long time ago when I was doing more VRO, VRA stuff, what we're looking at right here, actually, like if a workflow were to fail and you go into the logs here, they weren't always that helpful. It wouldn't tell you, why did it fail? So what we would always do is connect VRO to Log Insight, and you get a lot more detail as far as, troubleshooting, debugging. So I'm just curious if the HTML5 interface provides any more info as it relates to like failed workflows and things like that, if it's more verbose.
It is not, and I bet you if I dig deeper in, oops, sorry. If we dig deeper in, we will be able to find details of some of the workflows, but you're right.
Well, what's that debug right there? Is that just actually going to walk it through, run it?
Correct.
No. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I'm just getting jumpy.
So it's going to provide very similar output. You're right. At the end of the day, you'd want to tie this into Log Insight. And if you or your customer start connecting this in with VRA, VRA will give you other info as well to try to help you narrow down the kind of problems. But as Steve asked, this is one of the workflows that I was playing around with prior to this presentation. And what you see is that I try to connect into a REST API box, and I got connection error. And this is some of the errors that you'll get out of it. Sometimes it's even worse in this way where it just doesn't provide you any data. And that's something that you just got to work through. All right. question is, if we were to take a look, see if there's any more data. It doesn't look it, at least not from this one. Okay. So what I was getting at earlier on is if your customer has boxes that are currently running PowerShell configurations, boxes that are using, you know, SSH to do stuff, you can actually incorporate that right in and have them tie into VRO right off the bat, similar to what I just showed you guys, right? So anything that they had pre-existing could be added to VRO, and then they can start using VRO. VRO is free, but I find a lot of the customers I talk to, they don't turn it on because it's that Java complexity. It's that, you know, another function that they're not comfortable with. But ultimately, the thought is we even have some customers who aren't even command line savvy. So if you were to add the command line, like the shell and the REST API and the PowerShell through here, it makes it easier for people to click through, enter the information that they need, and then go on. Any questions? Okay, so I just want to take a quick look. I was just talking about the shell and the PowerShell. Ultimately, though, if you talk to anyone doing coding or doing VRO, the ultimate goal is to push everyone towards JavaScript. Reason being is because you don't need an extra host to do stuff. You don't need, there's a lot more event-driven / logging to make it easier for you to understand what's going on. But once again, it depends on your level of expertise of Java versus, you know, incorporating what's pre-existing, okay? Earlier on, I believe Steve and someone else asked about, you know, how come there's no NSX? How come there's no other pieces? By the way, VRO has substantial amount of plugins from network devices like Cisco, F5, Infoblock, you name it. And what you can do from the plugins is you can actually access all these resources, have it available within VRO, not only as a day 2 operation, but also incorporating into your workflow. So, for example, I showed you guys this workflow, right? It's fairly basic. Well, I say fairly basic because I'm comfortable looking at it. It may be a bit complex for other people. What I was getting at is if you were to edit this, right? And let's say you're looking for, you know, Infoblock integration. And let's say that this is that Infoblock integration. It is as easy as highlighting it, and you can drag and drop it anywhere you want. And then that workflow becomes part of a bigger workflow. Now, it's not as simple as that, because what happens is once you start going in here, you then have to start editing the attributes. So that way the variables going in from this connects to this, the output of this goes to that kind of thing. But what I'm suggesting to you guys is that this is an opportunity as a building block to build out and grow more of your VRO expertise. All right. Now, what I've come across when I was working for other companies, when I'm working with other customers, is that as you're comfortable of working in the space individually, it gets harder and harder when you're working with other groups, right? So I could be editing this and someone else could come in and wipe out my edits, okay? So the way, and there are many ways of tackling this, but the way that it worked for me was to build a folder structure. So that way, if a group is currently working on something, that's their group's name, and then they throw all their workflows in here, they test it out and they go on. Another group would do the same exact thing. If you have situations where you've got multiple groups working together, then that may be a folder based on a project. And unless you are in a company or working with a company that has a lot of developers, it's normally the case of a project. Let's say this is a network portion. It's always a network person that's always editing this one. A Windows person would edit this one, a Linux, and then there's going to be a master one that you tie everything together. And that's usually controlled by either a DevOps group or a VMware group. By doing that, what that does is people don't hit each other. And then at the end, when it's all grouped together, when you guys do the test, if something fails along the way, you'll see because it'll turn red. Work with the other groups to fix it, and then that becomes your first phase. When done, you make a duplicate copy of that and do a phase 2, and that's where the iteration change goes along. And it depends on how active your group is. A lot of time, it's a 3 to 6 months before next phase gets pushed out. But at least if you were to itemize it that way, when you do connect this to VRA and when you do publish it, you can publish phase 1. That works. Phase 2 is done. You publish phase 2, you demote phase 1. If there comes a problem, you demote phase 2 and you push phase 1 back up. Okay. And by doing that, it just makes it so that way people don't stumble upon already working workflows. Alternatively, what other people would do is if there's a decent amount of people within a group, they would actually grow another orchestrator, let them develop in that space, still tied into everything. Once that's done, they can actually move this into place. Okay. And if anyone's ever worked with CodeStream, what that also does is if you've got multiple orchestrator, you could actually copy the workflow from one orchestrator to another. What I've done in the past is actually have a dev, test, and prod orchestrator talking to VRA. So everything gets done in dev. And then CodeStream would then make a copy, send it over to test it out there, and then eventually send it out to prod. There's a few caveats to that. I was lucky to work with a VRA environment that talks to the same networks, the same servers, same everything else. If you don't, and you're using CodeStream, you just got to be careful of all the variables that are different between each phases. So I just hit the first 4 items. Any questions of what I've said so far? If you have worked with VRA or VRO, and if you have experience similar or contradictory, let me know, because I'm intrigued to know more of what people have gone through. It helps me to understand, so that way when I do help other customers down the road, it makes it easier. So versioning is the next topic. And as you can see, let's say, for example, if we were to edit this one, or we don't even have to, we just highlight this one on the general, you'll notice that there's a version number. Okay, so every time you make an edit, every time you make a change, then it gets incremented by 1. Right? There's only X amount that it stays in this environment before it kind of kills off the old stuff. Okay, but for any given time, you can actually right click and actually revert back to a previous version. So let's say, for example, someone came in and then they started mucking with the schema. They started changing around the code, they tested out, they thought everything's working, but ultimately what happens is something broke along the way. Well, guess what? Because you have so many iterations of it, you can actually step back to a previous version, a previous working version. And that way, all of your workflows, all of your orchestrator jobs completes. People don't always notice about this. So what happens is people would actually make a mistake, delete the whole entire thing, and then import everything back in. What I'm saying is there's a few steps in here that could be done already. So what I'm showing you here is actually Orchestrator 7.5, if I'm not mistaken. In previous versions, so in this version, everything that you see in library is actually all read-only. You can't really, you can use it, but you can't edit it, right? What you have to do is you have to make copies of it and go on. And that's a good thing, because what I've seen in the past is that people would actually edit the original. And then when they mess that up, there's no way of getting back. Depends on how far you mess it up, to the point to where you either have to build yourself a new orchestrator, or you have to figure out, or you have to get another orchestrator, copy off that workflow, and then put it back in. So at least for this iterations, this is all locked down, and everything net new could be removed and redone. All right. So like, as you can see, you can't delete it anymore. You can't muck with it much. All right. Now that I've explained to you, you build your own folders, you build your own workflows, you manipulate it, this is yours. If this orchestrator were to die and you didn't code stream it out, what that means is that you've lost everything. So if this is your custom stuff, what you can do actually is you can actually go to administrator mode. And these are all of the packages that made up the whole entire, library version. Okay. So if you were to add another package for NSX, for example, here, it will then show up as a new folder there, right? So for me, I created a whole new folder. So what I can do is I can add a package, and it's called, com.vmware.tam lab. All right. And there it is. It's there. It has nothing. So what we can do is we can actually edit this, and we could grab a whole bunch of workflows. Let's go. Let's say I want everything here, because that's the important piece. Everything else is already backed up, already has a copy of. Takes a look, it grabs everything, and it grabs all of the versions. While you see the latest and greatest version, but it grabs all of the versions that it sees right now, right? So you save it off. What you can do then is you can build that. Now it says rebuild, and the reason why I say rebuild is, for example, I've just built it, but I can actually go back in and I can add another folder. Let's say I'll add new. There's nothing in there, but I'll just add that anyway. Because now I've added multiple folders, I have to rebuild it again. As soon as I rebuild it, I can actually go, well, I want to export this out, save this off. I'll put this on my desktop. Okay. So right now I've got a desktop zip file that has this data. What if you were to bring it to another box, right? So I'm just going to delete it. It doesn't exist anymore. Likewise, I'm going to go back here to the library, and I'm going to go, well, you know what? I'm going to delete this as well. Oh, it doesn't allow me to delete. Oh, maybe because I've got stuff underneath. So if I were to start deleting these, because they're mine. Oh, I was going to show you a few things in there too, but that's okay. Give me one more second. So now it's empty. Oops, I didn't mean to delete that, but I actually did. You can now go back into Administrator, right click here and say, hey, I want to import a package. At the desktop, for some reason, it's not showing it. It should be com.vmware TAM Labs. Bear with me. Import, and you'll see that it popped back in again. For some reason, this GUI didn't show that, but we know exactly what it is. And here's all the folders. Here's all the files. So if you go back here, guess what? It all came back. All right. Now now that I've shown you guys some of the basics of what to do with VRO, my question to you guys is, does it make it easier for you guys? Is this helpful to you guys to understand more of how VRO works?
I think so, absolutely. I would love to poke around more in the HTML5 interface if you've got the time.
I do. I was playing around with it earlier, and I noticed that there's some gotchas. It doesn't seem to be working right. Oh, let me show you guys something, right? So here's the library, here's all the workflows. And all you need to do is you just need to search on what you want to do.
What if there's a little icon on the top right there to change it from like an icon view to a list view? Does that show the folders? You see within that page on the right side? Yeah, right there. It still doesn't show the folders. Huh?
It's one of those things that I still can't find, and it could still be there. I just can't. It just doesn't seem to be easy to figure out at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone here have found it, send an email to myself because I'd love to know, because there's still a lot more to this that I don't fully understand just yet. But from the HTML5 side is similar to the Java. For example, let me show you something. I've tied this to a vCenter, which is sitting right over here, right? So last time, let's see, Casper, right? So if I were to show you clusters, and I can actually delete a cluster, for example, right? And because I've already tied it to the environment, I can actually drill down to the ones that I want.
Make sure you do the right one.
It doesn't matter. I've blown it up a few times already. So what you're seeing me do here, it's all menu driven. Nothing special. It came through, right? It finishes. And if you take a look over here in my Casper, my Ghost data center, Casper is gone. Okay, so for you or your customer, if they're not comfortable with PowerShell, they can actually use Orchestrator to do this. Now, here's something strange. For example, so prod has a ESX and dev has ESX. Let me create a cluster called test. For some reason, it's not perfect. All right, so test is sitting right there. If I were to go here into the HTML5 version, I search for cluster, right?
So are those, you see those tags? Does that align with the folders?
So that, I was told that is how the HTML5 setup does to tie things together folder-like,
Mm-hmm.
but not actual folders. So everything is all tagged from here on out. The sad reality for me is this GUI, this Java GUI, this is the last iteration that will exist. Starting at 8.0 and beyond, this does not exist anymore. So in reality, I need to start learning this. If you're gonna start playing with VRO, I would recommend going this approach because you don't wanna learn anything too ancient that is already obsolete.
So can we test something? I want you to finish what you're doing, but then I have an idea. I want to test something.
I was just gonna run this, very similar to what you saw before. I was just gonna kill off that one. And if we take a look back, test is gone. Okay, what do you want to see, Steve?
So the tags and the folders appear to align exactly, right? So if you drill down into the Java client, it shows library, vCenter, cluster, and compute resource. So I was thinking,
Correct.
What if we created a tag on a workflow, and then does it create the folder on the Java side? You know what I mean?
Ah.
Just curious if they're just called different things, but really they're the exact same thing.
I don't think it will. We could
Could
try.
we can you within HTML5 like clone a workflow and then we could tag it appropriately and see if it creates a nested folder somewhere?
Sure.
I don't know. I'm just
Or we could even do it.
trying to break things. Yeah, do a new one.
You know? That simple? Okay.
Sure.
Let's do this.
Just do Steve.
Yeah, because I know that it's not
Okay.
familiar. So you've got that. So if we were to take a look here, it's web root.
And where's the test 01?
I know.
Huh.
So I've heard this, and I have to confirm, is that if you create it from here, you can't edit it from here. Notice?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Now, I was talking to another customer because I was editing through here, and then I was looking through the GUI, and I saw everything that's very similar. But then he goes, well, he was having problems editing. Come to find out, that's what he did. He started copying and cloning from here, which made this only read-only.
Huh.
It's executable, but it's read-only. So it looks like it's not backwards compatible. It's forward compatible.
Interesting.
Yeah, just as a info for you guys. Okay, so to tie this into everything else, if you have vCenter and you tie VRO in, you could actually run workflows through VRO. Likewise, does this look familiar to you guys? Let me show you. So I've been working with companies, I've been working with customers, trying to get Orchestrator, trying to get VRA up and running, right? To get them to be more automated. I find that I have a struggle to try to get that going. However, on the flip side, I already gave you the answer already. On the flip side, the customers tend to have VROps up and going and it's rock solid. And what they're starting to look through is the right sizing stuff, changing CPU size and memory size and fly. But there's also a portion to this as well. So for example, let me show you. Very similar to what I said about, Orchestrator having plugins. vRops has plugins as well. These are all the common ones that you know, right? But down here, if you go to the VMware Market, there's actually an Orchestrator plugin for vRops. If you install it here, and then you configure it to talk to your Orchestrator, what it does is two things. It does one thing is you could actually run statistics on, for example, let's say bear with me, on which workflows are being used, how often, by what, and stuff like that. So you can get the data out of Orchestrator like you do with the vSphere environment. What is also cool is that you could actually run workflows through here as well. So earlier on, I mentioned to you guys that I created a cluster over at the HTML5 version of Orchestrator, but ultimately you can run it through here as well. So if you were to do an action and you execute the workflow, because it's talking to the same Orchestrator, it knows the variables that is already in there. So it knows about the vCenter. And then for this one, you're going to call it, I don't know, Steve01. And what happens is, if we hunt around, it will show up. Steve01 will start showing up in the cluster. So what that means, of course, is if your customer is more VROPS friendly, tying in VRO to VROPS, they can actually see the problem and actually execute the problem before they even having to go over to, vCenter. Okay, well, what that means is you now have your customers accessing VRO, which also accesses a PowerShell server if you wanted to, a SSH server, REST API server. So it's not trying to push them to do VRO and VRA, but to push them to leverage their existing VROPS to do VRO and everything else. So the bottom line is all of the integrations between all the big products are starting to merge together, where if you stand up VRO and tie it to a lot of stuff, you can actually manipulate anything from vSphere to VROPS to VRO to VRA, even back to NSX and beyond. And that's it for what I want to show you guys. There's still a lot more to this, but I don't want to overwhelm you with too much coding, too much work. I just want to show you guys some of the capabilities, some of the flexibility that VRO can do for your customer. Any questions?
So I have one. Let's say I don't own VRA, right? But I want to get serious with automation and I want to leverage VRO. So I'm going to deploy that standalone. How would in your opinion, what would be the best way to deploy that from a design architecture perspective? Should I do multiple VRO nodes that are load balanced? Is that even a thing anymore? I mean, what would you recommend?
So to be honest with you, the way it's set up right now, the simplest way to do this is to start off with just one VRO to kick the tires to connect into VRA, to connect to vCenter and anything else you want to connect to. And let not only the VMware group work with it, but also the possibility once this is up and running, and it has REST API capabilities as well as plugin, this could be shared to other groups as well, right? The networking group can automate some of their stuff. The storage group, you name it, any group can start accessing this environment. And if it's just a plain standalone, what I showed you guys earlier is any changes that you guys make, you can actually export that out and have it saved off and then import it later on. For the new version of Orchestrator, which is the 8.0 and beyond, there's actually a plugin to Git repository. So what that means is anything that you've made changes to, the configurations will save it off to the Git repository of your choosing. So you don't have to do this manually anymore. And you could actually pull it back as well. Right? To do a federated orchestrator, it isn't necessary anymore. The way it's set up is you could set up, orchestrator, and then you could set up another one, and then you could actually mirror the data back and forth. With that being said, have anyone worked with Orchestrator 8 by any chance? Reason being is you deploy the orchestrator, and it's actually a Kubernetes environment that houses Orchestrator. So Steve, back to your question, with 8 and beyond, because it's a container running Kubernetes, that Orchestrator sitting on top of, you could actually build out as many orchestrators as you want. You can grow as many as you want and shrink it as many as you want. That's all.
Okay.
So for now, I would not recommend it because it adds a lot of complexity. Because if you want to try to federate Orchestrator, you've got to have a Postgres in the middle to sync everything. With 8.0 and beyond, it's somewhat built in, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. You can grow that then and there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question, actually a couple. So one thing in the Q&A, do you foresee JavaScript as the language of choice in future product releases, or will some other language be preferred, such as Python? This is probably more speculation, but.
Yeah, so I don't have an answer for that. Most likely the development team for Orchestrator will have an answer to that. I have heard that PowerShell is actually going to be incorporated in as well. It may not be as strong as Java, but it's going to have a component in there that you can leverage natively. Now that's I don't know which version that's going to come out, and I don't know if it's going to be successful at all. I just know that there have been talks of it. Other than that, if it's, for example, Python, right? Natively, I don't think there is, but you can actually shell to a Python. I mean, it's not beautiful, but it does work. And everything that I've talked to you guys here, it doesn't matter if it's, you know, REST API, shell or PowerShell. That to me is kind of dirty coding, right? Because ultimately everyone should really go towards Java. But what I'm also trying to get at is it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be functional. As you can get more of the functionality into VRO, you get more proficient, and then you get better and better, and you grow from there. All right. What's the next question?
So kind of along the same lines in the chat here, do you think we will move to a YAML input in the future? And I guess that's probably similar to like VRA or VRA Cloud, right?
Correct. So I believe it is. And the reason why I say that's because as a person using the environment, I find it to be too complex, you know, for what it needs to be. Similarly with VRA, it was too complex. Now that it's gone towards a more YAML or more, you know, how do you call it? JSON driven. So it's more structured. It's going to fall in here as well. It's going to fall in everywhere else because ultimately it's easier for us to actually start adding grouping in to make it translatable than to try to actually write the code to actually do it.
Okay. And then more of a comment in the chat here. Chris says that the Git repositories require a VRA license.
It does. That's unfortunate. I heard about the functionality, and then I'm trying to figure out how to tie it in because it's not well documented either. So it's unfortunate that it has a license tied to it. I'm hoping down the road that it doesn't, because anyone who runs VRO, other than so here's the deal. A decent amount of people are running VRO. A small amount run CodeStream, which copies the workflow and send it to other places or back it up. Majority of the people just back it up by hand. The goal was always, if there is a subversion or a JIT or, you know, like a Jenkins configurations where it comes into the environment, it backs it up, so that way we don't have to do it manually. That's what VRO has been missing for a decent amount of time. And I've heard Jenkins is built in. I've heard JIT is built in, but I didn't know about the licensing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me. That I didn't know. So,
all right. Any other? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you have questions but didn't want to ask it in public, feel free to send me an email, and I'll try to help as much as I can. All right.
Sounds good. Anybody else got any comments or questions? All right. Well, with that, if there's nothing else, we'll let everyone go a little bit early today.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sonny. Appreciate your time and sharing.
All right.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.